Alright, time for another draft. Oh, yeah, time for another draftphysics.com video presentation. Can't really start when I start because the video didn't start until it starts. Blah, 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 blah. So, it's another PhysicistMichael day. I mean, I got a couple of points to raise to him quickly as possible. Because they all have limited attention spans, I guess, to some extent. They don't take all of this criticism of their physics very seriously. So when you point out they don't have any evidence, they don't respond with the evidence, they just respond with some sort of insult that, somehow you're not appreciating how great their non-evidence is. I mean, the big pile of non-evidence of something going twice as fast, going twice as fast, requiring 4 times the energy to do it. It's a pretty simple thing to show, and they can't show it, and they won't take any responsibility for that, and then they'll just make casual comments, impugning the character if somebody says, "Did you really give me anything? I mean, have you given me any good reasons to believe your physics?" And my argument clearly is, no, you haven't given me any good reasons at all. And then you're going to insult my intelligence and say I am misinformed. Anyway, so anyway, Piro posted some long, why would he even bother typing all this crap? He could just make a video, and he doesn't, okay, because its videos are a lot more permanent than this mush. So anyway, but whatever. All right, so he's PhysicistMichael. So I'll read all of Piro's comment, but we'll get to that later. I want to do 3 little thought experiments for PhysicistMichael to answer, and these will be contributing to some idea that you're showing me your physics has integrity because it's going to answer the simple questions. Okay, I agree there are a lot of misunderstandings involved in his positions. So again, my misunderstandings aren't going to be quoted, and then like I understand, I actually know the truth of where this came from, the origins, because I read all of that crap, all of the old history. All right, and if you did the same, I think, if you were at all honest, you'd say, gee, this is a rotten history for a scientific theory. It's not a very convincing arguments being made. Anyway, and I've noticed several of the ones you list, so we'll go through the list, and I'll just again take it as unfair, frankly. So that's all you can say. But the whole thing has given me a lot of ideas for future video topics. So I can't imagine what the topics would be. I mean, they're elemental to physics. They've been gone over and over. And the problem is they've been gone over and over from a propagandist point of view, from one point of view, just like the young double slit. There isn't any commentary pointing out how it doesn't even work. He projected a single slit pattern. He didn't project a double slit pattern. It's just that simple. Infinitesimal slits mean you've created single point sources. The slits are now irrelevant because they can't possibly create wavelengths of differences from the surfaces. So you've just turned a 4-surface, 4-source experiment into a 2-source experiment. That's a fact, okay? It's not a misunderstanding. I'm contending that's an absolute fact, all right? And I haven't gotten anybody to make a rational argument explaining how, no, that's not perfectly accurate. But that might be of interest to people just starting out. So again, that's the scary part of what you're doing. Your misunderstandings, apparently you want to propagandize them into the minds of the youth, where at least that's not my agenda. My agenda is that the authorities, the people who know something, are supposed to make sure they know it, okay, that they got it right. And that's the part that should happen first before the little kids are indoctrinated into the truth. Okay, so, all right, so we'll get to the argument. So, obviously I have pointed out, so I left that part on the board, 9.8 meters is the ratio, right, to seconds, and it's 9.8 to 1 second. So if you're going to put the units in, you should put the actual numbers in also. So they they conveniently eliminate the 1, okay, from the actual statement. Okay, it's 9.8 meters, and there should be a 1 here, second, per 1 second. That's the actual ratio. And then when they want to do their other contrivance, okay, they, so they get rid of the numbers when they're inconvenient, and then when they do just units, they put the 1 here and leave out the seconds and just leave the 1. So, it's just little gimmicks, okay? They're not, this isn't showing somebody it taking 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast. It's way short of anything called really good evidence. All right, I don't think I even need this. Yeah, we're going to do that one first. Okay. All right. What was this one? Oh, the spring. Okay. So your contention, okay, Michael, is I have a spring. All right. It's compressed, whether it's momentum or kinetic energy, it's compressed by movement, right? So let's just concede that's what happens. And it's sort of some sort of proportionality to the movement. So you're saying that if I put a 5-ton train, okay, going 10 miles an hour into a spring, and I lock the spring at the maximum compression, so this stops moving and this stops moving, and there's no momentum, and I've stored whatever the energy is in the spring, sort of. I don't know exactly what you think, but yes, I would argue that's sort of what you've done, is you've created a circumstance in the spring where it's under tension, and there's torque inside of its, the crystal inside the metal. The crystals have slid across each other, and they're in awkward positions, and they want to get back to the normal position. So his argument is, okay, so that's what I can do, and then I can put 2, okay, 10-ton trains, 10 mass objects. I can put 2 10-mass objects on there, and they, okay, will go 5 miles an hour. So he thinks that'll happen, right? So that's your argument that, no, that's not what he thinks. He thinks 4 5-ton trains, you could say, I'll have 5 4 units. So 2 10-ton trains going 5, or you could say 4 5-ton trains. Same difference, right? 2 5s and 1 10, same difference. So he's basically saying that I can put 4 of them on here, and the spring will come back, and those 2 things will equal each other in terms of basically the same energy will move 4 5-ton objects at 5 miles an hour. And I would argue that there's no chance it'll do that. Okay, it doesn't have that energy. It won't happen. All right, so that's one example. You're going to get twice the momentum out that you put in. This will be twice the momentum as this that went in. So that's his argument, right? That I can increase the momentum. So I can put a 5-ton train in, and I'll get 2 10-ton trains out. I'll conserve the kinetic energy, and I will create free momentum. All right, so explain that. Explain how that doesn't happen if you don't think it happens. And explain what does happen. What happens when I put okay, let's just make it simple. What happens if I put a 10-ton, okay, a 10 mass object in front of the spring, and then release the energy I put in with the 5 going 10? What happens? What's your prediction? What's your theory predict? Okay, so that's this one. All right, now to draw on this, I wish you, just explain it to me. Okay, there's a gravitational body. Okay, it's producing a gravity. We could say that there's an average distance here that we're going to fly by. That distance has a total amount of, this might be whatever, 5 meters per second here, and it might be 50 meters per second here. Okay, it doesn't really matter. It has an average. We're going to cross the distance at a constant speed. And my simple argument is this sort of proves it's a time-dependent force. You do get it in increments of 1 second or 1 unit of time per unit of energy. Okay, and so the simple truth is the faster I go through this space, the higher my velocity, the less I get bent. So if I have a high velocity, I get bent just a very little, because I'm in this very little time. I'm in this force, this differential in force between the Earth and the outside universe. There's just a differential in force. We won't worry about whether it's bent space or not. We'll just say there's a differential. And the differential in the force field, okay, is something I'm traveling through, and the fact is it's all about how much time I take. If I go through it very quickly, I get bent very little. If I go through it very slowly, I get bent a lot, and I crash into the object. So that's the argument being made, is that time works perfectly to explain this phenomenon of how much you're going to, how much force you're going to be absorbing, and how much of it's going to affect your travel is completely dependent on the amount of exposure in time you have to the force, how much time you're in it. So it could be analogized as just spray paint or water, and you could just say your mass is a bucket, and all you do is collect the gravity, and as long as you don't touch anything, the ground or any other frictional surface, you don't lose any of your water. Now if you touch something, you lose your water. Okay, so how does that misunderstanding? So since I misunderstand, I would like you to explain why it's not a time-dependent force, and that this distance always produces the same amount of force. It's clearly not the same amount of force, but I'm just saying, explain to me, because your theory says per foot this is all the same. Doesn't matter how fast I go through it. It's the same force. I have to deal with the same amount of bending. The two forces, as you know, physics teaches it. You know, if I shoot something sideways, the two forces are completely independent. My velocity this way and my velocity down are two independent actions essentially built into the object, and they don't affect each other. So I'm just saying, how would you explain, okay, that drawing? All right. So that's this one done. All right, then the spaceship one, I've gone over and over and over, but we'll just do it one more time. So I have a spaceship, and I fire a gun twice. Okay, in the first case, I allow the bullet to leave. Okay, and so the bullet leaves with 2,000 joules of energy by your theory. So the mass and velocity equals 2,000. And then in the second case, I let the gun go and keep the bullet in the spaceship. And so the gun leaves, okay, with 2 joules. Okay, so I have essentially one atom, okay, 1,000 atoms, all right, going 1 mile an hour, one. Okay, and I have over here one atom, okay, going 2,000 miles an hour. Right. I should say it's the same thing. It's one going 1,000 would be the ratio, and we're just applying that to the mass. So it's 1,000 times more energy that left this way than left that way. And what do you say happens to the spaceship? Does the spaceship turn radically, because this is so much more energy, 2,000 watts versus 2 watts? Huge amount of differential in how much energy I have released to space. Does the spaceship radically turn? So these two events happen almost instantaneously. Okay, one pow, pow. So it's so quick that very little jitter in the ship. If I'm right, momentum is correct, because I did the same thing. Momentum says this is the same energy in the universe as this is. Newton's third law is perfectly consistent. Everything is just fine. Your theory says something radically different. Now, I'd say we already know the answer, in the sense that NASA says momentum. Forget about any of this kinetic energy stuff. But I'm going to ask you, if your energy can't move this spaceship, and the spaceship could be an electron, if your theory can't move this spaceship, your theory of energy, I'm going to argue, why should a reasonable person believe your energy is real? I mean, if it can't do this most elemental thing of moving the object. I mean, it's supposed to be in the universe that movement causes things to move, causes things to move. That's the whole conservation of momentum argument, that stuff that has energy gives its energy to other stuff. And then that stuff gives its energy to other stuff. And then that stuff gives its energy to other stuff. And what you're really doing is turning the energy from very big things, okay, into little things going in all kinds of directions. Okay, heat. And then in other cases, like a laser beam, you're taking a bunch of energy from different locations and causing it to go into a big thing going one way, that kind of thing. So you can do the two things. You can scatter the energy, or you can consolidate the energy, but the energy has to come from something else's momentum. You can't get the energy from nowhere. Okay. But yes, how can you do these things? You know, and the third one is the simple diagram of, you know, the simple experiment done, you know, bazillions of times. This one, simple experiment. I have a one mass, and I'm going to pause for a second. Well, I really don't need to. So I have a one mass cart, and then I'm going to drop another mass on top of that one mass cart. Alright, and double its weight. Okay, and then it's going to travel off at 1/2 the velocity because the mass is 2. Okay, so the 2 mass will go half the velocity. So this is an experiment, conservation of momentum, done as stated so many times. And the argument is this is 99%, okay, of the momentum is transferred. Your theory says this has 1/2 the energy, okay. So we lost half the energy, and the theory is explained by people saying the cart deformed, or the cart did some other silly thing, you know, it got hot, or sparks happened, and big waves of sound got created, and, you know, all kinds of stuff happened, and none of that could have possibly account for the tremendous amount of energy that the cart's movement would represent. So this is a lot of energy, and you're saying you have some theory, okay, that the energy I made it without using any momentum. So somehow motion didn't cause motion. So somehow I made something move, but I didn't have to hit it with anything moving. I didn't have to bang into it with something else that was moving. Something else moving didn't have to hit it. I mean, even your physics concedes that the photons have momentum. Now you play a game and say they're massless, but you know your physics basically says they're not massless unless they're in their rest state, whatever that is. You know, so when they're not in their rest state, they are a mass particle because they do carry momentum. So you even concede photons have momentum. So how can I create energy? That is, I made a whole bunch of bent metal, and I did a whole bunch of sparks, and I did a whole bunch of sound, and created a whole bunch of little bits of energy flying off in all kinds of directions, and I did it without using any momentum, significant momentum. So I did 100 joules of energy. I only lost 1 joule here, and they're saying that 90%, some 99% of this energy loss was in the form of energy, and it's a form of energy. And I'm saying, but I made it out of something I didn't use any momentum to do it. How can I not use something's MV? I mean, yes, that's the core of your formula. Okay, the MV is the core. How could I make something move or do something or bend something without using something's MV? Sorry, it just doesn't make any sense. And so you're saying I misunderstand. Well, help me understand how I don't have to use momentum to make momentum. The heat, the deformation are all things that are creating forms of heat. Momentum is, heat is momentum. Momentum causes it. And so there's absolutely no reason for me to think I can somehow make free momentum. And that's, again, free momentum. Now, also came up is the Piro one. So, yeah, let me do that real quick. So, sorry. It's one more. Just because he threw it in, and to me, it's so ridiculously easy to debunk as an idea that I don't know why you people believe this, because it's possible. It just doesn't make any sense. So it's the Professor Lewin experiment, which I showed to be a farce, okay, where he bangs a one mass object into a two mass object, and the two mass leaves with 133 with 33% more momentum. So this had a momentum of 100 going in. This has 0, and I end up with the two mass cart going this way, okay, with 133. So this is the two mass, and then I end up with the one cart going this way at 33. And your theory is that somehow this isn't real energy in the universe, that somehow because one's going left and one's going right, they canceled each other, okay? They're not real heat, they're not real things somehow because they're going in opposite directions. So if they were bullets, I could cancel two bullets, might have been pushing them in different directions. There's no theory that the explosion in the gunpowder isn't putting half its energy into the gun's recoil and half the energy into the bullet. Is there some? I don't think people think otherwise. But anyway, let's just continue. And I would argue, well, how do you explain then this simple fact that I can't just send something right in between two objects, okay, and I use 100 momentums, and I bang into two things, and I'm going to shoot them this way. They should be 0, and it should require no energy, because there's no energy going that way and no energy going that way, because they cancel each other. Is that your theory? Or is your theory that I can make this one go 100, and I can make this one go 100, and I can make free energy? I mean, my simple logical argument, my misunderstanding, as you're claiming it is that I have to use my momentum. If I give this 50 momentums, okay, and I start with 100, and I give this 50 momentums, I'll now have 0 momentums, because I gave it all away. And that's the simple explanation. Now, you say that's a misunderstanding, and kids shouldn't understand things that work mechanically like that. What they should understand is what? That they both leave with 100? Yeah. I'm just saying momentum does get the right answer, and it clearly is the right answer is things lose their momentum when other things gain momentum. When there's something in the universe getting momentum, then something else in the universe just lost it. That would be what I would say would be a phrase or a quote that should be the youth should be enlightened by. All right, so now we'll get to the nitty-gritty of the crappy comments. Yeah, I think that'll be it. So those are whatever 5 thought experiments, 5 challenges to why I'm unconvinced. I'm unconvinced because you don't have any physical evidence. And in these important ones where we do, I think, already know what happens, that is the spaceship example, we already know what happens. We know that the bullet doesn't have 2,000 joules of pushing power, and it's not going to make the spaceship turn more than the gun recoil. It's not going to work. It's not going to show itself. So in a vitally important circumstance, where there's no other outside influences, your theory completely fails. And you're claiming I misunderstand. No, I don't. Yeah, so screw that. I don't accept your accusation of misunderstanding. But again, you're not accepting my accusation against you that you do misunderstand. And I think your misunderstanding, I can argue that you haven't looked up Leibniz, and you haven't looked up the arguments he made. You haven't looked up the timing of all of those statements being made, the fact that Leibniz published just before Newton as a bit of showmanship, then the Deschardelet woman actually being tutored by a Leibnizian who actually sued her for plagiarism because she basically stole all of his Leibnizian special knowledge. I mean, the history stinks as science. It's just junk. The arguments and the theoretical creations were pitifully poor. All right. I believe that's enough. And such. Yeah. Okay. So Pierrot's comment. We'll go find that. And just more slander, essentially. Little bits of truth mixed with, silly little Brozorian storytelling. That has nothing to do with reality. But anyway, I mean, it's probably, it's a little better than that. But anyway, nobody's as off the subject as Brozo. This is what I want. Okay. But yeah, look at that. Big wad hunk blob, of crap from the Pierrot. So we went to the trouble, like I said, to type all this crap when he could have drawn a lever for us. So he could have done what I just did, right? It didn't take that long. So less than 20 minutes. He could have taken 20 minutes and explained how these mechanical things work. But he chose not to, and instead typed this crap. So he could have explained why there's no proof in 350 years. He can't show a single experiment where it actually happens that I have to use twice the fuel to go twice as fast. I mean, 4 times. Sorry, it's just so ludicrous. You can't even imagine, saying it just sounds so silly. 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast. Can't show a single physical experiment in 350 years. And here he is arrogantly talking about how other people are broken because they're not as big a silly dupe as you are. I mean, silly. And it just comes to that, right? I mean, they just have the propaganda. They have their little religious story. And they don't have any evidence for their Jesus, and we're all supposed to pray to it. All right, I used to talk to him, and before he talked only about basic physics. So again, that's not what I only talk about, but whatever. All the other subjects I have already opined on pretty significantly. But anyway, that went through debunking relativity and quantum mechanics all the way to now kinetic energy. So, I mean, it's, I like the idea of quantum mechanics. I don't like the idea of wavicles. So I guess that's the place where it breaks down, is when you take the energy and make it non-discrete and non-quantum. Anyway, when you break quantum mechanics by forgetting about the discrete quantum of energy, you're the ones who don't care to consider it as a quantizable stuff. I don't want to interfere with your attempt to explain this in terms he would accept, but I want to tell you a few things about Gary's thinking that take a while to realize. So this is the psychobabble bit, I guess. I mean, what's so hard to realize? I'm explaining why I don't think their theory works, why it doesn't make any sense. So I'm basically saying they're describing unicorns all over the place. None of these things are real. Entanglement, superposition, quarks even. I mean, all this stuff doesn't make any sense. Where are these things in the atom? What are they doing? It doesn't, it's all mush. And, the idea that there is not three-dimensional rigid space, I mean, that the dimensions aren't real and that they aren't fixed and hard, is to me a nonsense. There's absolutely no evidence in my environment of shrinking space dimensions and all this mush. Stuff sits at 2 feet apart for hundreds and thousands and billions of years. It's just, it's nonsense. All right, and illuminate why no experiments probably will penetrate. So, it's just it's such a frickin' lie to talk about it as if they have this volume of experiments when they're all little chicaneries. They're all little gimmicks, like dropping round things into clay. And I can just make the same counter argument that no number of experiments will penetrate these people, right? The Mythbusters do experiments that basically would be revealing to the kinetic energy question. Now, that's not the myth they were busting. And ironically, the myth they were busting wrong, in the sense they were claiming that two 50-mile-an-hour cars don't create a 100-mile-an-hour collision, when in fact they do. If you were standing between the two 50-mile-an-hour cars, it's going to be just like you got hit by a 100-mile-an-hour car. And because the two drivers can't tell the difference, doesn't mean the guy in the middle can't tell the difference. He can. But anyway, so they didn't even do that part right. But I mean, they smashed the car at 50. They smashed the car at 100. It comes out exactly as momentum would predict. 50% more damage, twice the damage. And they do it with clay, and it's exactly the same, twice the damage. So, pretty convincing piece of evidence, but can't penetrate these guys. They're convinced it's about Jesus. All right, anyway. So, number one, Gary doesn't understand or believe in units. I mean, he uses a simplification. What could be more simple than a unit? So, again, there's absolutely no evidence I don't believe in units. It's just an insane statement. I'm all for the quantum. I'm saying it all the time. People mock me for it even. I use the word bits. I mean, I'm all for a unit. Piece, a foundational kernel. I'm all for those concepts. So of course you have a kernel of distance, you can have a kernel of velocity, you can have a kernel of, let's see, what else is there? Yeah, there really isn't anything else, is there? No, there really isn't. That's everything in the universe, basically all you need to know. But anyway, you could have weight. Okay, that would be the momentum, just adding those two things. So yeah, where's there any evidence that I don't believe in units? This is just a lie, and they just keep saying it, and it just doesn't mean anything. I don't believe it makes any sense to do unit analysis, that is, take the numbers out of the units. I don't think there's much sense to that. He doesn't understand that energy being a change in momentum, so it can be either a change in the mass or the velocity. All right, I'll take a little pause for a second. All right, should be back. I believe so. All right, so I believe in units. They don't have any evidence. They don't believe in units. It's just nonsense. Okay, change. All right, he doesn't understand that energy being the change in momentum makes it a different unit. So yes, I don't believe in the idea that energy isn't movement in the universe. So it's a mass moving, and that's energy. And nothing else is energy, and that's what it is. So wherever there's a mass moving, there's energy. And obviously your whole formula, the formula we're debating, is made out of momentum. Momentum's right there in the core of it. So, I mean, to some extent, you have to concede that argument that anything with energy has to involve a mass and a velocity. So, again, more just made up crap that isn't true. Makes it a different unit. So yeah, I certainly don't believe there's a different unit. There's just mass, units of mass, and units of velocity. And this is where the second squared, etc. come from. Well, I'm saying, frankly, there's no reason for it. And There's no logic to defend it. So I have absolutely no reason to say the ratio is 9.8 meters per 1 second squared. I have no reason to do that. There's nothing compelling me to square the seconds in stating the statement. That is, there's no reason for me to say per second. There's no reason for me to be redundant. He doesn't, so I don't understand that. He doesn't understand at all that the change in meters seconds per leads to meters seconds squared. So it's meters seconds per second. So yes, I don't understand how it's totally useless to tell somebody per second. You've already defined the ratio. It's 9.8 meters per 1 second. That's the ratio. Every second you get 9.8. It's not every meter you get it, and it's not every second squared. It's just every second. It's not that complicated, frankly. Again, Newton got right answers without the square. Just a fact. All right. However, he also won't say distance and velocity are the same. He also won't say distance and velocity are the same. I'm saying that obviously the velocity of an object is not a distance, so it would be silly for me to say it is. It's clearly a rate at which something covers distance, moves through distance. That's what it is. Okay, I would say that velocity is the underlying thing that something has, and acceleration is merely a change in velocity. The real thing is a velocity, and acceleration is a velocity. It has to be made out of the same thing, the movement of an object. All right. I would say simply because the difference between distance and velocity are already a part of his common sense. I would say simply because the difference between distance and velocity were already part of his common sense. Yeah, the fact that a ruler isn't moving, I don't know what you're saying. I mean, it just seems obvious that why would I think distance and velocity are the same thing? Why would I think that? They don't sound the same. 1 foot. 60 miles an hour. Yeah, that doesn't sound like the same thing. Anyway, Gary doesn't understand the concept of a vector versus a scalar. I'm saying that if you go find the history of these things, it's made up. There's no experiment that proved it. It's just a gimmick. Again, it's just a mathematical gimmick. One day they said, well, our math doesn't work if we make these things obey the same rules. So we'll create completely different rules for them to obey, and we'll plus and minus momentum, but we'll allow kinetic energy not to have that glitch in it, because the glitch screws it up, because they end up making free energy. It's a free energy glitch. See, they don't care if they make free momentum, because they don't believe it's a real thing. So they can have 33 go this way and 133 go that way, and only 100 in. So they're just finding an excuse, but they can't allow that to happen to their kinetic energy, because it won't work. Or why it would come about. That's right, I don't understand. There's no video that explains why you've assigned MV, the same thing. You put a 1/2 in front of it and a square on it, and all of a sudden you say it's some sort of scalar thing, and we don't know which direction the energy is moving. It's the same 10-ton train. The momentum in the 10-ton train going on down the track is exactly the same as the kinetic energy. It's just nonsense to tell me one's a scalar and one's a vector. It can't be. The energy's the energy. Anyway, in your Monday video, if you are to show a light object hitting a heavy object, so the light object rebounds, the momentum in the negative direction, he will say you can add that momentum in the positive direction. I'm saying you have to account for all movement. That's all. You have to account for everything's movement. So in an explosion, it would be ridiculous for me to think that when the thing explodes, because there's stuff going this way and that way, and there's stuff going this way and that way, and there's always an opposite component in the explosion, that somehow there's no energy in the universe now because it all canceled. That would be a ludicrous way to understand what an explosion is doing. So when the sun radiates photons in all directions, it would be silly to say there's no work being done. Because it all canceled. All the photons canceled. It's, in my opinion, it's ridiculous statement. Okay, let's say you put 100 MV units in, they strike and end up with 133 MV units, and the other MV units in the 33 in the opposite direction. So he's describing the Professor Lewin experiment, where I clearly show there's obvious flaws in obvious defects that could be understood to be suspect. Blobs of clay stuck on the cart. There's no way the carts, by visual inspection, could possibly have a 2-to-1 mass ratio, okay? Because the 2-mass cart isn't nearly equipped with enough hardware to weigh twice as much. So obviously, if it's not twice as heavy, then you can get a higher velocity into it, and it's not really being measured accurately, the momentum. And that's why the experiment worked, is because he didn't actually do the experiment he said he was doing. And then I showed another experiment where he's doing the Velcro thing, and he's forcing them to stick together, and they don't stick. And so it's the same experiment, essentially, and there's nowhere close to any extra momentum created. Okay, let's say you put, okay, we did that. All right, he thinks that 166 MV units added as scalars. Add as scalars. So again, it's idiotic. I'm just saying that you can't have unenergy. So there's no unmomentum. You can't make momentum not momentum by putting it in an opposite direction of some other piece of momentum. It's just ridiculous. It's real movement. It's real heat, so to speak. It's a big, solid blob of heat. When something big is moving in the universe, it really could just be understood as heat units moving in the same direction. All right, this is what he's thinking when he says free momentum is found. No, it's created, and you can't do that. So, and I'm just saying that it's a perfectly valid argument to make. Your physics should have an easy resolution to that dilemma, that paradox, that problem, and you don't have any. You don't have any explanation that explains in any way how the universe knows you didn't make any extra momentum, because somehow it knows to do this plus and minus thing. Again, the case of the explosion just blows it out of the water. The case of the sun, it's all zero momentum, zero energy required. As long as you shoot something in both directions, you don't need any energy to do it. Okay, when Gary says energy, he means momentum. Yes, this is true. He thinks energy is momentum, period. Yeah, just like Newton, Descartes, and Galileo, I think that works just fine. That's also why when he thinks momentum is not being conserved in the example above, he claims that means energy isn't being conserved. Well, obviously. And I think you claim the same thing. If you don't conserve your kinetic energy, I think you would just also have to claim that can't be right, because you have to conserve the energy. But whatever. I don't know what word game you would play, but I'm just saying it's kind of obvious. So I don't know what your explanation is when you lose 1/2 the energy, when you make the carts stick to each other. The 5-ton sticks to the 5-ton, the 5-mass sticks to the 5-mass, becomes a 10-mass at half the velocity, and you just lost half the energy. Where'd you get it from? How could you lose it when you didn't have it? When I say gasoline has energy in it, but it has no momentum because it's not in motion, right, and I explain how, well, you can't see the motion. I can't see heat. I can't see a lot of stuff that's moving. So, but it'd be ridiculous for me. I don't see the atmosphere moving. I know it's happening. I know there's all kinds of molecules moving in all kinds of different directions. I can't see it. It doesn't mean it's not there. So, I'm clearly saying obviously the energy is atomic. It's built into the compounds, the structure of the atoms, the molecules. It's in the molecules. All right, well, anyway. Because it's not in motion, Gary won't track that. So, kind of a modern phrase, I guess. I don't track how you think that even on the nuclear level that it's not about moving bits, that the electrons and protons move, and that's momentum. And that momentum is what makes a nuclear bomb. Okay, he thinks that the momentum is in the gas in the form, so in the gasoline, he should be saying, in the form of moving particles somehow. Yeah, electrons and protons. That's right, under pressure. Pressure caused by, even Feynman would say photons. Okay, the photons moving the speed of light and turning virtual photons, but for photons nonetheless, and turning into energy is just letting it escape the trap it's been bouncing around in. That's right, the atoms, the nuclei of the atoms were created in the very hot, high-pressure sun. They're full of heat energy in a sense, and all you're doing is basically releasing what was trapped inside of them. A lot of pressure, a lot of little bits trapped. Okay, as if energy in gasoline were its temperature. The temperature you can't take. You can't stick a thermometer inside of a molecule. But the fact is, it was made inside an insanely hot place, indicating it's really hot. Okay, and it's still hot. As long as that nucleus is in the same shape, it's still hot, because it was created in hot. Okay. All right. In order to ignite it, you might just take the cap off the gasoline tank. So again, that's just a silly, cheap, rhetorical tool. I obviously don't advocate that that's true. And there's no doubt about how the chemistry works and how you initiate the chain reaction of the deconstruction of the molecules. So it's the same is true for uranium. I mean, if I had water mixed in the gasoline, it's not going to ignite. But if I take uranium, for example, and put it all in one big pile, then I can blow it up. But I can't blow it up. I can't cause the chain reaction if I mix a bunch of crap in there. All right. But of course, somehow you need a flame to start the process. That's right. You're initiating a chain reaction. Because it's not the tank holding the energy. Well, of course it is in the fuel. It's in the molecular bonds. When you break the bonds, they release more energy that breaks more bonds, and then that energy breaks more bonds, and that's how it works. Some microscopic phenomena, according to him. I don't think it's that complicated in the sense that somebody could draw you a picture of the molecules, the hydrocarbons breaking into pieces, and how every time you do that, you release a certain amount of electrons at a certain velocity. Anyway, some microscopic phenomenon, according to him, is holding it in. Yes, I think it's according to chemists would agree. And even biology people would understand it as, yes, that's exactly how we function, is to cause these chemical reactions that have excess heat transfer. But it's really in there in the form of tiny particles with momentum, and that's where the energy is. Yes, photons have a momentum. If you trap them between electrons and protons, you can store them, essentially, store their energy. And if you jiggle the atom hard enough, you will break the geometry that's holding it together, and the atom will break down, and the little pieces will escape, and they will push on other atoms and do the same thing to the other atoms. I don't think that's an extraordinary belief. This is true even of energy in a spring, according to his ideas. Well, obviously the energy in the spring is something, and what I'm saying is that it's always metals and stiff materials that make springs, and we know they're all made out of crystals, and that the crystals can slide. And so all you're really doing is saying you've aligned magnets up, and they're right across from each other, and they're very comfortable. And then I take those magnets and I slide a little bit, so now all the magnets are not perfectly lined up. That thing will restore to its original condition, because the magnetic orientation of the domains, requires it. So that's what's going to happen. It's going to restore itself. So it's going to give you back what you put in. All right. Hardly, again, a bold crazy idea. You know, I mean, some of this is funny just because, again, they're arguing against what conventional physics says. I mean, Professor Lewin does says you can finagle kinetic energy, but nature can't finagle momentum. He clearly believes in conservation of momentum, and these people are saying levers don't conserve momentum, springs don't conserve momentum. There's not lots of things that don't conserve momentum. So even though nature has to conserve it, it doesn't. All right, Gary thinks math can be adapted and reverse engineered to any system. I think it's obvious that you can create a bad formula and then you can create secondary formulas that are consistent with your wrong formula. I think that's really easy to do, yes. He does not do the math. I do some math. I don't do your math. That's right. But I'm sure a mathematician can make his description work out mathematically. I'm sure of that too. So I guess you're agreeing with me that there's really no difficult task to make momentum always work, because it always does, and that's just a fact. And you're not going to show any place where it doesn't work. All right, the math is infinitely adaptable. Well, I'm saying your capacity to make an error, to misdescribe what a platypus is and call it a duck, I'm saying that's almost infinite. You know, you can make mistakes, you know, a whole bunch of them, and there's no force except logic to prevent you from just keep redoing it over and over and over again. So we know the mistake of the Jesus fable, and you've just replaced it with a different fable. You know, the K.E. fable. You know, it's just another Holy Ghost. It's just another pile of crap. This is related to his idea that mainstream science has never done these experiments. It just happens to be a fact, and it's a really glaring bad fact. Your science is shit. Okay, you're doing shitty science because guess what? A real scientist says, I got to prove this. So they go out and they show that it takes 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast. If that's what they're going to claim, they prove the claim, especially when the claim is really easily proven. With 400 times resolution in space, and it only takes 5 minutes, and you don't need an eclipse, the Eddington experiment is nothing from space. A science with credibility would have redone the experiment when it takes 5 minutes to do. Credible physics would have done it. Okay. Let's see. This is related to his idea mainstream science has never done these experiments. And it's just a fact that they haven't. So, you know, again, that's my bad. You haven't done the experiments, it's my fault. Oh, okay. And so can't be trusted. It can't be trusted because half of what they say not only is experimentally defendable, but it's batshit unicorn crap. I mean, it's so wooey and made up. Oh, the smallest particles in the universe have ESP. Yeah, I mean, you know, that's just stupid. But while he has also not done the experiments, well, again, I don't have the billions of dollars, the millions of laboratories, the hundreds of millions of scientists. I mean, silly. You shouldn't be waiting on me, okay, to do all the experiments you haven't done for the last 300 years. I certainly can't do the Eddington experiment from space from my basement, right? My basement isn't a satellite in space, so I really can't do it. Whatever. And doesn't matter because obviously it will work out. So again, both of us are contending, making predictions. I'm saying you've been making your prediction for 300 years, and it just seems you should have proven it by now, given his rock-solid, non-mechanical description of what to expect. So, non-mathematical description. So again, it is mathematical. It's just a lie to say it's not mathematical, to say MV equals E. Of course it is. It just doesn't look as, it doesn't look as mathematical because it doesn't have a bunch of your fake symbols and bullshit all over it. Gary expects the math would work out and the experiments behave as he says. I'm just saying I have seen no evidence of any credible experiment that in any way doesn't perfectly fit momentum as being the right answer. He thinks we should expect the same thing and would if we were not liars. I think you're liars in the sense that it's clear the science isn't very credible, that you have a really bad religious theory, in the sense that you haven't proven any of it, you haven't done the experiments, you don't have solid evidence. And that's just a fact. And to deny that fact makes you a liar. To deny that anyone who really loved the truth and loved the whole scientific process would be humiliated, okay, that your science couldn't be bothered to actually prove any of the crap it says, and when it's easy to prove it. Okay, again, the Eddington experiments, 5 minutes of satellite time. 5 minutes. Okay. He thinks I and others are secretly agreeing with him. I don't know where you think I said anything like that, but don't want to give him the satisfaction of admitting he's right. Well, I think you do in fact understand how you do in fact wish your science was credible and had integrity, because it actually did prove what it asserted. I think you would like there to be an experiment showing it taking 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast, and I think you would like NASA to do the Eddington experiment. So I don't think there's any doubt that if you had your choice, you would prefer they prove what they say. Anyway, Gary does not understand that you actually need both the conservation of momentum, which is impossible, and the conservation of energy. So you can't conserve both in any circumstance where you're taking the energy from objects with different masses. So if you want to convert the energy from one object moving, completely take all of its energy and put it in another object moving, if they have uneven masses, you can't conserve both momentum and kinetic energy. It's impossible. They get completely different answers. Can't happen. So I don't even know why he would say something like that. Let's see. Momentum and the conservation of energy to have enough equations to solve for final velocities. So again, he's basically saying that somehow these are compatible theories, and they're completely incompatible. The entire first 100 years of their existence, everybody knew it was a real argument. Everybody knew there was a right answer and a wrong answer. Everybody in the argument was quite convinced they were not compatible ideas. So it's, this just happened as the rewriters of history want to pretend, oh, it was just semantics. There was nothing really to argue about. Momentum and kinetic energy are perfectly great little butt buddies. They get along so well. No, they don't. Do not underestimate how little Gary understands. So I'm just going to argue that I'm going to do a lot better than you on a test, of 100 questions about the actual history of these two theories. You're going to fail the test dismally, and I'm going to pass. So we know who really hasn't looked at the facts. Okay, even straightforward arithmetic, which there was none from Leibniz, frankly, on this subject. Gary thinks levers are doing something like pushing. Things hitting other things obviously are pushing on the things. Somebody's pushing on somebody. In every instance of a contact where two things move through space and they actually bang into each other, one of them's pushing on the other. Okay, so if one side of an object hits the lever and on the other side object 2 is twice as far from the fulcrum and half the mass, it will leave at twice the velocity. So he didn't put the half the mass part in, which is kind of important, obviously. But he didn't put that in, so who knows who's doing some misunderstanding here. It's like thinking when 2 billiard balls, so obviously it's not about 2 billiard balls, it's about a billiard ball that's half as light in this case. But anyway, it'd be like thinking when 2 billiard balls collide, the cue ball is sliding along with the object ball, pushing it up to its own speed. So he's basically just saying when something hits something that it's transferring its speed. And that's exactly my argument. It does absolutely create pressure, and the pressure pushes the object. So obviously I am saying that yes, the pressure pushes objects. you know, and I'm arguing that if the object is more massive, then it has to go through a process where that pressure is converted into a speed the heavier object can actually travel. All the atoms have to agree. And so all the atoms have to know how fast they're supposed to go. So if you're going to change the velocity of the object, there has to be a conversion that takes place. So it takes a little more time for the object getting hit or pushed with the pressure to absorb the pressure. And time is something it isn't given. So when slow things hit fast, the small things, not too big a problem getting the energy in. When small things hit big things, big problem getting the energy in because you don't have enough time to convert it into the newer, slower velocity. This only, it's only, oh, okay, what's all this? All right, its own, it's like thinking that when two billiard balls collide, the cue ball is sliding along with the object ball, pushing it up to its own speed, transferring the velocity. It's true with heavier objects hitting lighter objects. Obviously, if there's no doubt. I've shown the Newton's cradle millions of times. Clearly, if the two objects weigh the same, okay, then you can do a complete transfer. They have the same mass, there's no conversion necessary, the speed is exactly the same, and the other object just absorbs all the energy. He doesn't understand that everything elastic is acting like rubber. So yes, I certainly don't understand that, because clearly there's two kinds of elastic: storage devices and hard objects that resist, storage. They won't store the energy because they're not rubber. So he thinks the only thing elastic is rubber, when no, that's nonsense. Or springs, and how energy is transferred. So he doesn't understand that there is elastic and super elastic. This would probably be the better description. So in the sense you have elasticity in the hard object. Well, they probably should say hard elastic and super elastic storage. Okay, it's only instantaneous because the inevitable flexing transfer motion is just very fast. So no one's arguing that it's not very fast, but the point is still there are objects that don't move, and they certainly don't move by absorbing all the energy. So they don't absorb all the energy the other object had, and some of it is reflected back. If a tennis ball is bouncing off, I'm throwing a tennis ball at a box, and I have a big fat cat in the box, so now the box doesn't move. And then I slowly but surely put the cat on a diet and get it lighter and lighter and lighter. Well, as the box moves, the tennis ball bounces back less and less and less. So the more the box yields, the more energy I get back in the tennis ball. The less energy I get back from the tennis ball, clearly indicating that the energy I'm getting is a reflection, that the tennis ball is reflecting off the heavy cat box and the tennis ball, and so that I get all my energy back, and I'm getting less and less of my energy back the lighter and lighter I make the thing I'm hitting. If we imagine the lever as a long piece of flexible rubber, so why would a sensible person do that? But even if they did, it still can only store energy you put in. You can't put in any extra energy. So all a rubber lever could do was, keep oscillating or do something to spoil the perfect conversion. So instead of having 99% efficiency in the transfer, you could, have 50% efficiency, but you're going to create a bunch of rubber wobbling around. Anyway, so it acts more slowly in our imagination. One side gets bent, then the energy is in the distorted rubber. So this isn't much different than a spring, and of course springs work. So again, springs conserve momentum. Is then spent flinging the other object on the other end of the flexible lever. So and again, how does that change the fact that it conserves the momentum? Note, even if the lever were truly absolutely rigid, and the transfer was through pushing at speed. That is, yes, one object's going to go twice the half mass, is twice the distance, it's going to go twice the speed. That's what it's going to do. Exactly consistent with conservation of momentum, and it'll work perfectly. And completely inconsistent with this kinetic energy theory, in the sense that if I put the energy on the light side, I'm losing a lot of energy. If I put the energy on the heavy side, I'm gaining free energy. The initial object would start slowing down as soon as it touched the lever, and so there is no reason to believe that when the second object leaves, it has the initial object's velocity. And already pointed out, it won't have the same velocity because it's twice the distance from the fulcrum, but you have to make it a half mass to obey the rules of conservation of momentum. So you put a half mass, twice the distance, and the scale balances perfectly. So you have a 2 mass, and you have a 1 mass, twice the distance. It balances perfectly. The lever says they weigh the same. It's the same amount of work to move one as it is to move the other. Just a fact. The momentum is perfectly consistent, explains the thing perfectly, it makes perfect sense. This again was the arguments used against Leibniz back in Newton's day. Was basically the Newtonians said, by your theory, levers don't work. And you've got a free energy device in a lever. I can make free energy. I just drop heavy things on close to the fulcrum, and I put light things far away from the fulcrum, and I have the gun and the bullet scenario. I have a scenario where I can put 2 joules in one side and I get 1,000 joules out the other side. That can't happen. That's stupid. We don't need to believe that. Let's not believe that. And again, when Newtonians still existed, they did win the argument. Okay. Rather, the second object would leave the lever at the point where the incoming object is pushing the lever at the same speed, at a speed lower than the second object had so far built to. So the whole point is that moving half the mass, twice the speed, is exactly what you can do. It's not a problem. So you have half the mass to push against gravity. It's obviously going to consume half the energy to move half the mass. The half mass only collects half the gravitational force opposing it. It all fits perfectly. So you're in the gravity twice as long, twice the velocity, and there's no problems. Okay. You're in the gravity twice as long because the lever is a fixed object and it can't do it any other way. Okay, they're in the gravity for the same amount. They're in the gravity, moving in the gravity, okay, at 2 different velocities. The time they're spending opposing the gravity is exactly 2 to 1. Alright, forget entirely trying to explain that the rubber lever is actually instantaneously taking the energy in and putting it out both. So we know none of this happens instantaneous. So it's been measured. I mean, the steel rod bends, you hit it with a hammer at one end, and at the speed of sound in steel is how the energy is transferred. So it takes time for the bang at one end to get to the other end, and then the little ball will fly off. So you can put a little ball bearing next to a piece of steel, a steel rod. You can hit the end and make sure the steel doesn't move, and the vibration will go through the rod, and the other end will move, and it will kick the ball. So we already know that stuff. So it's there's no instantaneous here. Taking energy in and putting it out both to the incoming object and the outgoing object. So yeah, there is no instantaneous transfer. Alright. Instantaneous is not a real word, like random. These are not real things. It can be like instantaneous, but it's not really instantaneous. Okay. Gary doesn't believe in Galilean relativity, so I don't even know where this came from. I do believe, Galileo didn't believe relativity means there's no three-dimensional space. I mean, he didn't say there's no absolute universe. So, yeah, clearly the fact that in three-dimensional space 2 things can share some components, and by sharing those components they can't see them anymore, is perfectly reasonable. So there's nowhere I've ever indicated I don't believe in Galilean relativity. It's worth knowing that this comes from trying to say that quantum mechanics makes no common sense, but it should. So I don't know why I never said any statement like that. I'm basically saying physics should make sense, and their theories don't, and it doesn't logically fit. The puzzle pieces do not fit together. It doesn't work. Bent space moves at the same speed as a photon. That's just a coincidence? Yeah. Sorry, it's a ridiculous coincidence. That general and special relativity don't make common sense. Okay, so again, I obviously the two theories are basically two ways to interpret the same thing, that speed matters. How fast you're moving affects clocks. So this is radioactive isotopes are affected by velocity. Because the fact is, in heavy gravity, you're jiggling a lot. You're getting pushed in, you're getting pushed back out. You're doing a lot of jiggling. So I did the whole basketball player argument that you can be going across the surface at a speed, but you're going, the surface speed doesn't have anything to do with your actual speed, because like the basketball, you're going much faster than the player is running. Okay, the player could be going 5 miles an hour, and the basketball is going 25, because it's covering so much more distance in the same time. So I've already made these explanations, and they just pretend I didn't do it. And of course I did do it. Ending up here where kinetic energy also makes no sense, though it should. So he keeps doing this though it should thing. I'm saying physics should make sense. I mean, a lot of people are quoted kind of saying if you can't explain it to a 10-year-old, it's probably not right. But whatever, I'm saying it's not logical what you're doing to physics. Your statements aren't logical. Your definition of what a proof is isn't logical. It's not a proof. This isn't. We have common phrases, nail in the coffin evidence. It's not even close to, you didn't even build the coffin, let alone put any nails in it. In Gary's defense, I think he's just expressing that Galilean relativity doesn't make any sense. So again, that's a lie. I'm saying there's nothing in what Galileo's describing. That is, as if you have things in common, you can't see them. Okay, these atomic forces. So if you have some sort of atomic effect doing the same thing to both of you, you are going to move together, and you're not going to notice that there's anything affecting you. And that certainly if you do something to diverge from each other, that you'll see. But you can't see the stuff you have in common. But it should. He keeps putting that in quotes. And so cannot be real or true. Again, this isn't anything he's quoting me saying. Gary does not accept any of the counterintuitive nature of physics. So I'm clearly saying I don't accept any of the made-up, wooey, mushy, wormholey crapola that you spew with no evidence that the physical universe actually contains any of these components you claim exist. So yeah, I'm claiming that's all just woo. I don't know about counterintuitive. I mean, I'm just trying to think. I mean, obviously you have this intuitive stuff on your side in the sense that the rolling object intuitively, the fact that it's rolling 4 times further, intuition says, yeah, just measure how far it rolled. That's a way of measuring how much energy it has. But then you have to think about in space, that wouldn't happen. And it would only go twice the speed, would only go twice the distance, because you're not really extracting the energy. I'm just saying the intuition thing goes on both ways. I mean, you're using intuition to say water waves are the same as light. That somehow the existence of a simple pattern of on and off, you're saying your intuition says anytime there's an on-off pattern, it must be constructive and destructive interference. So, I mean, there's just as many points where I can just accuse you of being the silly people following your intuition and thinking seems like or looks like is like. So I've already made that direct accusation at you. You're just a looks like her, seems like her, is like her. You don't need to prove anything. Which is truly a part of classical physics long before QM and Einstein relativity. And again, it all worked, and you fixed it. So something that wasn't broken, you fixed. That's one of those other kind of oxymoronic traps you want to avoid in life, is fixing things that aren't broken. And so he rejected it all except momentum. Well, what I found is that as I tried to create a model of reality, I found the more I extracted your knowledge, what you claim, your physics claims, the more of those things I extracted, the easier it became to make a coherent unification theory. And the only thing in the way of a unification theory and a simple mechanized extension to Descartes' work, I mean, all you do is add a few little tiny elements, the electron, the proton, and charge, and you can make it all fit together. And the only thing that was stopping it from fitting together is the crap you've injected that was never true. Okay, if he were to ever realize that even his idea of momentum requires just Galilean, so I don't know why he keeps saying this, that somehow I disagreed with Galileo when I keep pointing to Galileo. And, I'm not saying Galileo had exactly all good ideas. I'm just saying that a ton of what he found is what I'm defending as being real. That is the 1, 3, 5, 7. He's the one who figured out that it's a time-dependent force. All right, velocity and position relatively. So again, I have no objection to the existence of relativity. I just don't think relativity means there's no absolute universe. I think that's a silly projection on your part. He would reject momentum as well. I don't know. If he were to ever realize that even his idea of momentum requires just Galilean velocity and position relativity, he would reject momentum as well. I don't even understand why you would think Galileo didn't believe in momentum, but whatever, too silly. So then the Chris Moore guy did challenge Pirot to say something, to sort of respond. So he's making the point. The rejection of units in his video, okay, and so I pointed out, so he just quotes me saying, velocity is meters per 1 second. Okay, not per 2 seconds or 3 seconds. It's per 1 second. That's 9.8 meters per 1 second. So they've left the technical truth out of the equation. It really is technically true that it's a ratio, and it's 9.8 to 1. It's not 9.8 to any number. And Pirot's response is to say velocity is acceleration. It's the other way around. Acceleration is just a change in a velocity. So you're just using a ratio to change a ratio. You change 9.8 to some other number, okay, 9.8 to 1, and you change the ratio and say 4.8 to 1. And you're just saying, well, what's the difference? That kind of thing. And that's the acceleration. Just check that out. So when Mendham is arguing 1 foot is the same as 1 square foot. Well, it's draft science is arguing, but anyway, it doesn't matter. No, but the argument is that it's just a fact that the math is requiring you to come up with the number of these specific units. So even if it was 2 square feet or 5 square feet, the fact that you've made it square feet is your business. And the fact that 1 times 1 is 1 is also just a fact. So yeah, it's not too bad, right? You're tough luck. 1 times 1 is just 1. All right, I agree there are a lot of misunderstanding involved in his position. So again, that's the PhysicistMichael guy. I already read that. So let's refresh this, see if there's anything new. His video is supposed to be up today. It's part 2, but he's made it clear that his videos are not going to be in any way responses to any of these points, and he's just going to be making standard physics trite videos, frankly, from my perspective. It's just the same old crapola you could read in any crappy textbook. And it's, in my opinion, junk science, but whatever. He's just going to think he's going to just keep doing that. Okay. Thanks for the video. Look forward to many more like it. As in our made-up case above, if the quantities of net work and charge are completely arbitrary, we wouldn't expect them to match. So he did something. There must be a typo somewhere, because he's saying this. Thanks for pointing out that typo. As you say, a minor typo with critical implications. I've corrected it with credit to you. Part of the issue is that there really isn't much of a appeal to common sense description of what energy is. So of course there is. It's mass moving. I mean, how can you can't get any more complicated. There's no complication. And as long as you recognize that photons do in fact have a mass, you can understand that yes, the little bits have momentum, the big bits have momentum. It's just one kind of stuff. It's mass moving, a velocity. It's a mathematical quantity, so I don't know, what does that mean, you know? And I don't think Noether's theorem, so this is where they also go, is to this, you know, these whack job theoretical devices to claim that somehow there's no consistency in something, or there is, you know, so this is a symmetry argument. And no one's arguing against symmetry in the universe, right? So what's you know, I don't even know why that would be relevant. Will be accepted here. Although it's a beautiful concept. I mean, you know, isn't this the mushy talk we've all heard before? Okay, and I love to eventually make a video for it. Well, good luck with doing that in any kind of terms that could be in any way appealing to an engineer type or anyway, or a puzzle put together, because the pieces won't make any sense. The best description I've seen from the Feynman lectures with the indestructible block analogy, right, with a very fake, non-real thought experiment. What's the point? Yeah, so they're going to illustrate how the real universe works by modeling an unreal one. I think the best I could do is take it from an applicable standpoint. If work and KE are related, well, I mean, obviously work is just what you're calling a portion of something's KE. The KE is all the energy, the heat, the noise, the sound, the this, the that, all of it. That's the KE. Something does something to something else. It causes all these different kinds of responses. And the ones you're preserving are the ones you're calling work. But that's all you're using work to do, is describe a portion of the actual energy. Or whatever reason. I mean, clearly when you're doing the work in, you're aware of all the work. Okay, and when you're taking the work out, well, yeah, who cares? I didn't have to put the work in, so I don't care if I lost some. And if work is dependent, obviously I would say you have to have conservation of work, okay? Because work is just another word for the same thing, energy. All right, is dependent on what forces are acting over a distance, and K is related to the motion. Well, it's obviously not motion in any direction. Then I have a way to predict how the motion will change if a force is applied over a distance, and vice versa. So again, you don't. So I have challenged him to answer my questions and to explain how a lever works, and we'll see if he does. Whenever you decide to call these quantities, it gives us a model for predicting how the physical systems will evolve under different conditions. A model that doesn't work, that doesn't move a spaceship. So it's 2,000 joules out one side, 2 joules out the other side. The spaceship doesn't move, and they're going to claim they've modeled reality. So I have actual energy, I produced it, and nothing happened because the energy has no power. It can't do any work, but it's energy. I mean, the whole thing doesn't make any sense, which is exactly what physics tries to do. So obviously this is just the science is obviously corrupt, and it lacks any dick at all, so to speak. It's all just a religion now. Side note, I never really got the whole your mission should be to choose to accept it thing. Well, clearly, I don't know. You haven't watched any old TV, I guess. Isn't he an IMF agent and accepting missions what he gets paid for? Yeah, well, why would he want to accept a mission where he's going to get killed? Or he passes on this one and gets a beer. Yeah. Yeah, if the mission looks like, fuck you, I'm not gonna die for you morons, okay? I want a job I can win, get paid. Maybe take the next world-saving mission if it's a more tropical locale. Yeah, exactly. Why not? He's a mercenary. He doesn't, He's not joining the religion. He's just saying I'll be a soldier in your fight. But yeah, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna be a sucker. Here's a suicide mission. Go get killed. Oh, fuck you. I don't know how he couldn't get that. I mean, I'm an insane moralist, so to speak, in the sense I'm an insane believer in ethical responsibility. But in that circumstance, why does the guy have any ethical responsibilities? He's a mercenary. Alright, so I don't know where that comment, I don't know, I thought there was some other comment where he said something about, he's just doing this teaching thing. So that's what it's all going to come down to. I don't know why he's replying to these trolls. I mean, I almost don't want to read these comments because I'm just like, what? You're really responding to this kook? I can't really comment on a test I haven't seen. If an object has a velocity of 2 meters per second, then the numerical answer for the 1/2 mv squared and mv will give equal results. Yeah, if it's one object, but he's obviously talking about changing. So maybe then we're just in that area where we're unlucky with noise, but can't say more than that. Well, anyway, this was just such a troll comment. Obviously, Franklin who home thong in the cheek testing. I don't know. So anyway, he's not even making sense. So obviously it's just Farley, and here he is wasting this poor guy's time. Well, I can't believe he fell for it. Gravitational energy? ? Wasn't that another name for incoherent magnetism? So why would somebody think that? I mean, anyway, so he just goes, well, there's no parallel, but yes, I mean, obviously they're somewhat similar because push is push and pull is pull, and there's some push in the pull. And so then this other moron comment, let's see, wouldn't the force formula be wrong if an object is not touching Earth? Okay, so forget it. I'm not exactly sure. So he's using all of this kind of crap. Oh, sorry. But he won't touch my arguments. So he'll spend time wasting time on these thought experiments in the comments. But we'll see. Let's see if we can get something more specific out of him. We'll see. I mean, he seems fair cop enough. I mean, it's the early days. He's got time to involve himself with the commenters. Let's see if anything comes of it. But yeah, this is an awful. I mean, he really should understand these. This is trolls. But anyway. Yeah, so that's that. Alright, so now we can do chat crap, I guess. No, that stays. The other thing goes. This thing has to go over here. And I guess we can get rid of this. I don't think I have to play anything else or read anything else. I don't think so. So that's good. So, I do have to do some work today, so I have to get out of here early, and it looks like there's nobody saying anything, so that makes it even easier. To my benefit, I suppose. Oh, it's the guy who deletes all his messages. Isn't that just special? I guess it's time to just block him, right? I mean, there's really no point in putting up with this horse shit. I mean, I've asked him not to do it. He won't satisfy my request, so we'll just say goodbye to you, Shirivechekara. Very annoying people. Don't understand what they do, don't understand how they live, don't understand what they wear, don't understand how they talk, don't understand what they believe. Yeah, it's all shit to me. cannot relate in any good way. So let's see, maybe it's a hopelessly small audience and I should just get about my business. I am already tired, so it's not a good sign. 11. Well, 11 should be enough to generate something. Come on, people. Maybe just nice if you say something like, well, they really should have evidence. If they're going to claim something like it takes 4 times the energy to go twice as fast, they really ought to be able to show that experiment. It's not brain surgery, You don't have to kill anybody or risk anybody's life to test that. It doesn't cost $1 billion. So why haven't they done that one? I mean, they had that space station floating up there for decades. I'm sure they had a decent telescope on it. And, they could have done the Eddington experiment 1 billion times without really working up a sweat. Just take no work at all. Again, 10 minutes of the astronaut's time. Alright, so let's see if I can think over any other points to raise. On the subject of kinetic energy. I think the 2-gun thing is a good one too. The idea of just making a zip gun. So you just have a hollow tube. And you put in the hollow tube a very light bullet. And on both sides of the charge and explode it. And the charge makes the bullets leave with a very high velocity. And then you take 100 times that weight, let's just say, 1,000 times that weight, and you make the bullets out of, that. So they're bigger, but they fit in the tube, and it's all fine. And then you fire the same charge, and they leave with, 2 joules worth of energy. So in one case, you have a total of 4 joules. In the other case, you have 4,000. And it's exactly the same gun. I mean, exactly the same charge went in, the same explosion. How could, in one case, it make 4,000 joules of energy, and in the other case, it doesn't make, it only makes 4. Now, by their theory, right, the momentums cancel, so there's no energy. Yeah, right? That's their theory, right? So there's no momentum anyway. Says you. I'm sorry, says you, okay? I'm saying that the recoil of the gun is already showing you the truth. All right? And it's not 10 times. It's exactly the change you make in the mass will be exactly what you end up as the change in the squared velocity. So I don't know where you get that from. Clearly the example is 1 atom moving 1,000 miles an hour versus 1,000 atoms moving 1 mile an hour. That's the kind of ratio you're stuck with. That's what the gun and the bullet are doing. And it's clearly not 10 times. 100 times change in the mass is 100 times change in the velocity. I'm sorry, there's a huge contradiction. I don't see how you can possibly not understand it. One has 1,000 times more energy. It's 1,000 watts versus 1 watt. I get it from conservation of energy and momentum. I don't know. What do you want me to do? Just block you? I mean, you're saying things that are completely unsupported by any experiments. The actual experiments we do have, the very few that they have done, completely debunk what you're saying. That has nothing to do with reality. There is no conservation of both forces when I change the mass of the object being affected by the force. There is no compatibility. They give two completely different answers. I don't even know what you're doing. 1/2 equals 1/2? Yeah, you're breaking the equation twice. So what the fuck are you talking about? How the fuck can you make the same kinetic energy? It's not possible, retard. Is equal to 1/2 m. Well, put the m in. Do the math. It's not the same kinetic energy. One atom going 1,000 miles an hour. Do it. Okay, and we'll just say the atom weighs 1 to simplify things. The mass is 1. All you're stuck with is 1,000 squared versus 1 squared. Guess what? It's not going to work out in your favor. Those aren't going to be the same number. You people, you really do. My expectations have to be so fucking low. I mean, I already have pretty low expectations. And you just always outdo yourself to be even dumber the next day. How many meters per second is that? Doesn't matter. You're just multiplying the numbers, for fuck's sake. It's v squared. It's not meters per second squared. Fuck, you're not even obeying your own fucking formula, for fuck's sake. It doesn't matter. Miles, meters, it doesn't make any difference. They're just units. If you use the same units, you haven't broken anything. So go ahead and just say meters per second. One atom moving 1 meter per second. The other atom's moving 1,000. One atom's moving 1,000 meters per second. The other circumstance is 1,000 atoms moving 1 meter per second. Who the fuck cares whether it's meters or miles or feet or boogers? It doesn't make any difference as long as you're using the same units. For fuck's sake, I can't believe you're hanging on that. I don't use meters because I didn't, for 50 years of my life, frankly, meters weren't relevant. I lived in America. I don't understand the world in meters, okay? I don't look across the yard and say, that's 30 meters. I say that's 30 feet. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I look at something and I see feet first. I see yards second. Like a baseball field, you know. So again, he's doing m and 100m. The bullet example is 1,000 times ratio, okay? The bullet's 1,000 times lighter than the gun, and it goes 1,000 times faster than the gun. It's pretty close to the truth. So use that analogy. It's even worse than that, frankly. The gun is heavier than 1,000 bullets, and the fact is the ratio is the bullet does go faster than 1,000 times. But it doesn't matter. It's really close to good enough. It's been analogized as a 2-liter bottle of Coke and a dime. So, that's the kind of mass differential. I thought we were talking about 2 light bullets in the tube compared to 2 heavy bullets in the tube. That's what I just said. In one case, the total energy leaving the gun is 2 joules, or 4 joules, And in the other case, it's 4,000 joules. So I put two light objects in. They shoot out 2,000 for each one. 4,000 total joules of energy in the universe. And in the other case, okay, it's, the two things leave with 2 joules each for a total of 4. How can you not understand this? I mean, I fucking drew it. It's just, I just can't. What the fuck? Not two things of different mass. I don't know. I'm talking about light bullets versus heavy bullets, and then you say, I didn't know it was about mass. I just don't understand you people at all. I mean, I have a gun. I put 2 light bullets in. Okay, they weigh, whatever, 20 grams. 5 grams. I don't care. Okay, little bullets. Okay, little ones in the gun. Same charge. Okay, so same exact TNT is in the middle. I fire the TNT. The 2 bullets fly out. The argument is if you calculate their mass and velocity, you get numbers of 2,000 and 2,000. I do the same experiment, same charge. I put in something that weighs 5 kilograms instead of 5 grams. And 5 kilograms. 1,000 times difference. Okay, this one shoots out with 2 joules of energy, and this one shoots out with 2 joules of energy. What's to understand? I got 4 joules of energy out of one explosion, and the same exact charge gives me 4,000. You have to explain where the other 3,994 or 96 units of energy went. Where did the rest of the energy go? Or are you saying the gasoline has different, and the TNT has different octane, different BTUs of energy depending on what it's firing? Somehow it just decides to be more powerful or less powerful depending on what you put in front of it. Again, you keep saying something that's physically not true. The gun recoil has already been measured. The bullet has already been measured. These are experiments that have already been done, jackass. The momentum is conserved. All the physicists say so. All the physicists say so. Every single fucking physicist on Earth has said so. The momentum is conserved. You can't change the fucking momentum, shit for brain. That's a fact. Okay, that's not a thought experiment. That's a factually calculated, done experiment, okay? That the same energy is going both fucking ways. So quit changing the fucking momentum. You can't change the momentum. And obviously it's not zero. So again, you want to play that game. That's your business. It's totally idiotic. And I really don't even think any physicist would say that when a bullet is fired, there's no momentum. Obviously, when they're mathematically analyzing it, they say there's zero, which is conservation, because they started with zero, fuckhead. So they're just explaining how its momentum is conserved. But obviously, I've always stated it's a silly thing to say, just like it's silly for them to say that when I'm holding 100 pounds up with my arm, that I'm not doing any work. It's a silly thing to say. The fact that physics says some silly stuff, it still doesn't matter. We're really trying to get to the core of what they mean by it. And what they mean by I'm not making a change. But obviously, if you get shot by a bullet, you're going to know there's something changed. I mean, it'd be fucking stupid to say I got hit by no energy. Again, you just keep playing word games, okay? It's not a hard scenario. I'm telling you, there's two experiments. One experiment, there's 4,000 joules coming out of the explosion. The other experiment, there's 4. You want to argue conservation of momentum, that's a different subject. The argument is explicitly in a universe where momentum has to be conserved, that's the fact. That's what the gun will do. Okay, so that's the statement being made, jackass. You want to say something else happens, go ahead and say it, but you're going to be 100% wrong because no one will agree with you. No one's going to agree with you. All right, I'm just arguing that that's a lie. Okay, I'm going to just block you if you're going to say things that are completely stupid. The KE obviously isn't the same. Just as in the Professor Lewin experiment when he loses KE, when he shoots the two objects with the same, the explosion in the middle, a heavy object and a light object, and the KEs don't match. He concedes they don't match. There's no conservation of kinetic energy. So again, physicists don't believe in conservation of kinetic energy, jackass. They believe in conservation of momentum because guess what? All the experiments demonstrate it to be true. So if you're going to argue some other premises, go argue them somewhere else. I'm not doing that for you. I'm not tutoring you on the subject of conservation of momentum. That's an established fact in the textbooks, fuckhead. You want to argue that? Argue with Lewin. Again, violating Newton's third law, so there's absolutely no point for you to say this shit. They believe Newton's third law is real, jackass. So again, you can't say this shit with a straight face. Okay, if the objects are different masses, they don't get the same energy. Well, how does the explosion know they're different masses? Where did the energy go? You lost 3,996 joules of energy. Where the fuck is it? Newton also said the force equals, the goddamn momentum, shithead. He said it overtly. You want to go twice as fast, you apply twice the force. You want to go 3 times as fast, you apply 3 times the force. There's a clear requirement, that you conserve these quantities. And there's a direct correlation between a force and a speed. So what's this crap? The established fact is the textbooks that you cite all use negative momentum. And it doesn't matter because they all cite conservation of that momentum. Fuckhead, and that's exactly why they say 0. It starts with 0, it ends with 0. Yes, we compress the spring with energy. I show you it. Lewin even says, I'm getting paid to do this work to compress the spring. So, duh. Everybody knows there's momentum in the spring because you put it there. You actually did physically work to do it. And you morons are telling us, no, there's no energy in the spring. So, obviously, it's a retarded statement. But fine, do it for your mathematical purposes. There's no movement. It's stored energy. It's not moving. Fine, I agree with that. Start with 0, end with 0. They're proving conservation, you shitheads. Nothing else. That's exactly what they're doing. I mean, this is so dishonest, frankly. I'm just going to block you because this is so fucking dishonest. This is not what the fucking professors are teaching. They are not teaching conservation of kinetic energy. That's a fucking lie. There's energy in the spring, not momentum. So again, it doesn't matter. The point is there's a certain amount of it, And the point is when you do the 2 experiments, you get a completely different amount out. You have to explain how you did that. How does the gasoline make 1,000 joules 1 minute and make 1 joule the next minute? Explain it. All right, well, on the record, that's a lie. There's nothing dishonest. It's dishonest to imply that Professor Lewin believes in conservation of kinetic energy because he overtly stated he doesn't. And he does believe in conservation of momentum, and he directly stated it over and over again and made it as clear as possible. Nature cannot finagle momentum. He's made the point of it, for fuck's sake. So if you're going to lie about what the professors say, fuck you. The point is you have to conserve the fucking energy. It doesn't matter what you call it. And clearly they say you have to conserve momentum. Those are the two statements. The statement they don't make is you have to conserve kinetic energy. That's the statement they do not make. Yeah, fuck you, cowardly tyrant. No, I don't have to tutor morons and trolls. Fuck you in the ass. Get what you deserve in life, you fucker. All right, have everybody walk up to you and just ask you every day, why are you wearing that shirt? What do you think? Do you think that's a good color? Fuck off. Microsoft. Yeah, troll Farley. Who the fuck would call themselves Microsoft Word? Yeah, it really sucks. You just can't have a real argument with people who can make a real argument. And Piro will defend all this crap because it's to his advantage, all this trolling. You know, because they can't come up with a real answer. They can't actually respond with a relevant argument about how it's a fact that this will come out this way. It's a fact. I put the two guns inside of each other. They're not going to fly apart any faster. They're going to move exactly the same recoil speed. I put the two bullets in. They're going to do exactly what bullets do, and they're going to leave with bullet speeds. That's just a fact. Then the thing is for you assholes is to explain how that can possibly be true. And the real catch is momentum works perfectly to explain it. Momentum perfectly explains it. Kinetic energy has nothing. It has no response. You just end up losing 99% of the energy. To something magical, frankly. There's no rational explanation for where the energy went. Yeah, the world is just so good. So it's not ignorant; it's belligerently ignorant. You know, it's not misinformed. It's belligerently phony and fake. You have to be illogical and dishonest not to recognize that's a very good argument. I don't have a good. You have to say something like, "I don't have a good explanation." Again, there was absolutely no flaw in Newton's description, okay? Except for the stupid precession of Mercury, which you can, obviously it's so close to the sun, you could explain there could be some aberration that you don't know about that's causing this defect in Mercury. So it wasn't a big deal, frankly. Tiny little precession. So not a big deal at all. And everything else he talked about was absolutely correct. Except for the religious kooky stuff. Nothing's broken. and you needed to fix it. You needed to radically change it, frankly. And so now it doesn't work. You can't land on the moon with your physics because of this gun bullet problem. It won't work. Your calculations will miscalculate the energy of the thrust if I don't make it out of something ahead of time and make it all understood that this is the mass that you're moving. But if I use variable masses, you have no hope of properly landing on the moon because you think the 2-liter bottle going 1 mile an hour has 1,000 times less energy than the dime going 1,000 miles an hour. You actually believe that. And you won't land on the moon with that logic. And in spite of all that, those arguments, you just keep belligerently defending this fable, this religion, the 1/2 mv squared spirit, the living force. I mean, it was called the living force. Oh, that's so scientific. I mean, what, are you all Scientologists? I mean, do you fall for anything? UFOs and volcanoes? You'll fall for that too? Shit. So it's ironic, when he says there's energy in the spring, not momentum, because they actually do experiments where they're counting the energy that goes into the spring as the initial energy. So the compression of the spring is entirely created by momentum. And they'll say, yes, momentum just compressed the spring, that was the energy. And then they'll have conservation of momentum out. So it's a complete cycle. The whole story is basically told. Momentum compressed the spring, and then they got conservation of that momentum out. I mean, you throw a tennis ball against a brick wall. What do you think's happening? The tennis ball is a spring, essentially, right? I can have all different kinds of springs, right? I can just have a rigid piece of metal and I can bend it, and that's essentially a spring. It's storing the energy. So I throw the tennis ball at the wall with momentum. I calculate its momentum, and I conserve its momentum. I hope to get most of it back. But obviously tennis balls don't work that well, so I have to always say super ball or something, hard rubber ball. I think the wall gets twice the momentum of the ball. Well, you can think anything you want, but it's ridiculous. Okay, so sorry. You have no evidence of it, let's just put it that way. You have zero evidence that the wall absorbed twice the momentum, so the ball doesn't move, it doesn't show it. So until you show us how the planet moved or something, you've got nothing. How can the momentum be in the spring if the whole system gained momentum? So again, I don't understand from what perspective you're saying that, but how can the momentum be in the spring if the whole system gained momentum? How can you say that way? I'm just pointing out an example where I put the momentum in. The ball, it has the momentum. I threw the ball, the super ball, the hard rubber ball against the wall. I get exactly the same momentum back, irregardless of direction, and that's a fact. It's hard to measure any tiny change in the motion. Yes, of course it is. I'm just saying you're in tough luck. It's your tough luck, fella. You're not going to prove your theory. So I'm just saying it's still just your UFO theory. You say it has twice the momentum. I'm saying there's absolutely zero evidence the brick wall has twice the momentum. So fuck you and your theory. Well, I don't care. It doesn't appear to change direction. It absolutely changes direction. So there's no problems here. I'm just saying momentum doesn't have a problem. Momentum's saying it reflected. Newton's saying it reflected. It's not a big deal. As I pointed out, something can't reflect if the other object yields. If the other object shows momentum, this doesn't bounce off. Okay, so I take the hard rubber ball and I let this thing yield a little bit. Well, that little bit it yields is going to degrade how much the ball bounces back. And the more I let this yield, the more it moves, the more it gains momentum, the less this bounces back. Those are the facts. The less energy goes into it, the more it yields, the more energy it takes. The less it yields, the less energy it takes. Well, I've already eliminated the wall. I'm just saying it's a heavy object. Doesn't matter. And I'm saying as it moves, I get less reflection. Isn't that true? And if I do it in a Newton's cradle, I get a perfect transfer. I only transfer 100%. I don't transfer 200%. There's no 300% certainly. You're arguing for 300%. Clearly, there's no such thing. The more it yields, the less energy the thing has left over, the less reflection. There's absolutely no reflection in the Newton's cradle. No, zero reflection. So what are you talking about? The experimental evidence doesn't demonstrate what you're saying. So just again, these are, in my opinion, these are just lies. You're just implying that something happens that doesn't happen. You have no evidence that happens. The object moves plus the spring is compressed. I don't even know what that means. When you push a spring, the object moves plus the spring is compressed. Obviously the object moving is the thing pushing in the spring. Duh, it's the thing has the momentum. The momentum we stored in the spring. You people just can't even come close to being anywhere near coherent to what I'm saying. I have 3 batteries here. Okay, 3 batteries. I bang 1 battery into 3 batteries. What do you think is going to happen to the reflection versus 2 batteries versus 1 battery? In each case, I'll get less and less reflected energy. And when I get to 1 battery, I'll have no reflected energy. 0. This hits, no reflection. This hits, no reflection. I make this a little heavier. It's 2 batteries. This hits, big reflection. 3 batteries. This hits, bigger reflection. And eventually, I make this heavy enough, I get 100% back as a reflection. That's all the energy there is. That's all the energy the system has. Yes, exactly. So what are you arguing? The Newton's cradle is different? No, it isn't. It's exactly what I'm describing. What the fuck are you talking about? It's exactly what I'm describing. Yes, there's the case of equal masses. The one thing is just as easy to move as the other thing. Therefore, the energy is completely transferred, and you only have the same amount of motion. You don't have any more motion. You don't have any more energy. You don't have anything. And when it hits the thing that's a little bit heavier, more of the energy bounces back this way, and less of it goes into this. This has less momentum. build a giant wall out of batteries and you get 100% of the momentum back. That's exactly what I said. So I don't know. You're saying exactly what I said. Exactly what I said. There's only two places the energy can go. Back this way or that way. It can't do both. And it certainly can't do both with 100 extra or 200 extra. Amazing. Fucking amazing. I just don't know how you can't. It's so obvious what's happening. You have 100 momentum you start with. That's all there is in the system. You can't ever have some place where there's more than that. If it reflects in the opposite direction. It doesn't mean it's no energy. It means that, yes, it's 100 momentum in the opposite direction. That's all there is, 100. You sent it that way. If I make the two weights exactly the same, I have 100 in, I get 100 out. I don't get 200 out. So there's no evidence that there's any extra other energy except 100. That's all you fucking goddamn have. And you either put it into the other object or it reflects off the other object. That's all you can do. That's all this experiment is about. You're just saying how much of the energy reflects. And if it doesn't reflect, it went into the other object. And there's 100 in the other object. There can't be more than 100. Oh, I'm just not going to play this because you don't think momentum is a vector. It's just a lie. It's a vector. I'm just saying going right does not undo going left. It's just nonsense to say they undo each other, or they're anti-energy, or they're un-energy, that you can create something called unmomentum. I already did it with the bullet example. You're just such a pathetic lying sack of shit, frankly, to play this game. Do you really believe that the photons are negated because the sun sent photons in the opposite direction, that those photons aren't going to do any work? So the photons going this way don't do any work, and the photons going that way don't do any work in the universe. I mean, fuck you. You're so dishonest. I'm making claims about physical facts, about who Leibniz was, who Newton was, what they actually goddamn said, and what the experiments actually show. Huge goddamn difference, fucking liar. So just Farley again. How do you explain... Okay, I'm just going to block you. How do you explain the gun situation then? Question mark. There's zero momentum before you pull the trigger and after. So I'm finally going to block you. That's just too ridiculous. The bullet has zero momentum. Okay, fuck you in the ass till dead over and over and over again. It's such a ludicrous statement. The bullet doesn't have any energy and the gun doesn't have any energy. Fuck you. Too fucking stupid after all these fucking goddamn arguments. It's just too fucking stupid. Ugh, commenters, people. Fuck you, religious kooks. You're all a bunch of religious goddamn fucking morons. Fucking Jesus bullshit. The Jesus energy. It can appear or disappear. It can be crucified and then it'll rise from the dead. And blah, 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 blah. Disgusting mush. It has zero energy, but yes, it'll blow a big hole in your fucking goddamn head and shoot your brains all over your wife. But it doesn't have any momentum. Or energy. Because I shot another bullet the opposite way and undid it. Pathetic. God, I just hate people. You're just so dishonest to make these lame, stupid arguments. There's zero energy in the gasoline, and then there's zero energy afterwards because the gasoline made things move left and right at the same time, so therefore there's no energy anywhere. The gas doesn't have any energy, and nobody does. You blocked him because you can't answer what? Fuck you. I mean, it's all public. I mean, it's clear why I'm blocking him, because I've been over this and over this. I drew it on the goddamn board. For fuck's sake, it's what actually fucking happens. There can be no dispute about actually what happens. I put two guns inside of each other, 4 joules of energy. Fact. I put 2 bullets in, 4,000 joules of energy. Fact. Okay? There's no arguing that. Again, who calls themselves the loser? Yeah, right. I just ought to block people based on their screen names. So we'll see. Let's see what Michael does with the questions I have posed. And that's all we can do. So I've given him 4 good examples of where kinetic energy completely fails to make any rational sense. And we'll see what they do. I mean, the gravity argument is just, what's their explanation going to be? I'm going past something with gravity. The faster I go, the less I get bent. Clearly indicating it's about how much time I spend in this area that I'm going past. The faster I go, the less I'm bent. I mean, how can it be more obvious? It says 9.8 meters per 1 second. That's the formula. So it's obviously about how much time. If I'm less than a second, it's going to be less than 9.8 meters. If I'm a lot less than a second, it's a lot less than 9.8 meters. It's clearly just units of time. So if I'm going 19 miles an hour, I obviously got 2 units of gravity, 2 1-second units. And that's exactly the truth. You fall from 4 times the height, you're only in the gravity twice as long. You only gain twice 2 units of gravity. I mean, it's an unbreakable argument. You have to understand gravity as a time-dependent force. All right, it doesn't say, he's saying. It doesn't say 9.8 meters per 1 second. That is exactly the ratio, so you're lying again. This has been explained billions of times. It's a lie. It's absolutely, that's the ratio. 9.8 to 1. That's the ratio. It's a ratio, you fuck. It's a rate, you fuck. A rate is a ratio, you dumb, ignorant fuck. That has been explained to you over and over again. Imagine them saying that. Imagine them just saying, they're actually now defending some notion that when Newton said 9.8 meters per second, he wasn't saying it's 9.8 meters per 1 second. Per every 1 unit of time. They actually are trying to argue that's not the truth. That the rate isn't a ratio, and the ratio isn't 9.8 meters to 1 second. The bullet gained most of the energy. There's 2 bullets in the example, fuckhead. But when the bullet is given more mass, the gun gains larger and larger portion of the energy. So that doesn't explain. I put 2 bullets in the zip gun. It's bullet against bullet. They both shoot out of the gun at 2,000 joules. I put 2 heavy bullets, as heavy as guns, inside the tube, and they shoot out with 4 joules. Fuck you. The bullet gained most of the energy, but when the bullet is given more mass, the gun gained larger and larger portion of the energy. So you can't even understand the simple thought experiment. So there's absolutely no evidence for your theory. I'm just saying there's no evidence. That's the whole point of me giving you this thought experiment, is I defeated it by doing the two experiments separately. I do the two experiments separately, bullet against bullet and then gun against gun. And I get two insanely different definitions of how much explosion happened. One definition says 4,000 joules of explosive went off. The other experiment says 4 joules of explosive went off. I mean, you're really so fucking thick. You're too stupid for this conversation, frankly, if you can't even understand the fucking what's been illustrated, retard. I don't even know what this means. Eventually, the bullet and the gun have the same amount of mass. What the fuck does that even mean? The point is that you can't have an explosion and then say the explosion decides to not explode. It decided that it was only going to give 4 joules, and later it can decide to give 4,000. I just can't. Like I said, I just can't. I gotta keep telling myself, Gary, you're just overestimating. My brain keeps saying, oh, people can't be this stupid. They can't be this scummy. I mean, they have to have some sense of integrity. They can't just keep talking this shit. Okay, so he's saying when 2 bullets are in the gun, there's less time for the explosion to work. So he's saying that there's more exhaust gas. That's your explanation. 3,000. So 3,996 joules of energy were lost in exhaust gas. But no, that doesn't make any sense because the bullets have more energy. They collected more energy. How could that be true? How could there be more waste energy in the circumstance where the 2 bullets? Because that's the one that has 4,000 joules. That's the one that has way too much energy. I mean, you're just so full of shit. So I'm just going to have to block you too. Meaning both bullets have half. When the bullet would have what the bullet would have when shot from the gun. So that's a lie. So you have no experimental evidence of that. You have 0 evidence that if I make a zip gun with a bullet going both ways, that the bullet comes out half as fast. You have 0 evidence that that's true. 0. Nothing to back that up with. You're just saying so. Fuck you. I fired a zip gun. Bullet comes out damn fast. See, the interesting thing about a zip gun is you're taking away the weight of the gun. And you're basically just using a trigger to fire the bullet. And so the trigger flies off almost as fast as the bullet. So that's the part you have to be really careful of, is not to blow your hand off with the speed of the very light gun you're using. The gun is so light, the part that matters, the handle, is so light that it's got a kick that's as strong as the bullet. And it's got a size that isn't, instead of being 1,000 times heavier, it's only 100 times heavier, or 50 times heavier. So it's not much heavier than the bullet in the sense, so it'll break your hand, break your fingers. You got to be really careful how you fire the gun. So they just make up this shit, like I said, they don't have any experiments, they won't admit they don't have any experiments, they don't have any physical experimental evidence, and they'll just make up these fake results. Well, what if the bullets don't go as fast? It still doesn't account for the fact that you're missing thousands of joules, not 5. Accounting for 1/2 of 4,000 doesn't fix that you're still 2,000 way out of line. Too silly. But yeah, they'll just never, these commenters don't have any obligation to pay any attention to what I write. They don't have any obligation to draw what I write and then explain where I made a mistake. Explain where it doesn't happen that way. So when I, shoot a billiard ball and there's two other billiard balls and I shoot right in between them, they can just make up shit because they don't have to actually draw it and then say, see, this one gets 200 and this one gets 200, and so you started with 100 and you end up with 400. Yeah, no, you don't. I don't really think people are as dumb as these trolls make humans to look like, but we'll see. Because like I said, if you can get a real physicist to talk about it, then you can have a real explanation that it has to obey the rules. They know the rule is you have to conserve the momentum. They know these are rules. So they have to explain how it works without violating what they know the professor has said. What they know their textbook says. What they know the experiments that exist already say. I don't see how any real physicist, if I put it to him, I don't see how any real physicist could say, yeah, gravity is dependent on distance. It's not dependent on time. I don't know how they could say that. I mean, 9.8 meters per second. And I'm saying the technical way to say 9.8 meters per second is to say 9.8 meters per 1 second. That's the ratio. That's the rate. Half second, 5.9 meters. 2 seconds, 19.6 meters. You could write the ratio as that. You could say 19.6 meters per 2 seconds. And it would be exactly equal to 9.8 meters per 1 second. Those two equations are saying, those two statements of rate are saying exactly the same thing. Newton could have wrote it that way. I mean, he really could have. Could have written it 19.6 meters per 2 seconds. Could have done it. And then we wouldn't be having this argument, right? Because then you'd all understand, oh, it's a quantity of seconds. Oh, more seconds, more force. Less seconds, less force. See, you'd understand. But because he assumed you were smarter than you are, he didn't realize he had to put the 1 in, because you aren't going to figure out it's only 1 second. 9.8 in 1 second. Not any number of seconds, just 1. Alright, so it looks like we're done, which is fine. Alright, let me just check for the sake of argument, for the sake of interest, just see what the number is. 11 still. Oh, it's 12. Okay. Yeah, big difference. Anyway. Okay. So we know we have to be at the 15 or 16 number, I guess. And we also need somebody to, say something that isn't a retard. So now we've lost Bruce. We're, out of luck until somebody else shows up again. But whatever. I mean, redundantly going over and over the same shit just plain sucks, frankly. So I really shouldn't have to do it more than 50 or 60 times. So this video I'll definitely put on the Debate Physics website, because the 4 thought experiments or 5 thought experiments I threw, frankly, will not produce anybody with a rational counter-argument. I don't care who Paolo Di Toro is. Says he wants you to unblock him. I don't care. Fuck him. Gee, how uninteresting. I've made the rule. Look, you have to send me an email. You want to get unblocked? You send me an email and you post me a link to your channel. That's it. You're not getting unblocked any other way. You have to send an email, okay, I probably should force you to send me a picture of your driver's license, because you really should be accountable. If you're going to comment and talk shit, you really should be accountable. I should be able to rub it in your nose for the rest of your fucking miserable, shitty little life. What a fucking piece of crap you were to defend your wacky, silly totem pole religion. And pretend you were on the right side merely because you had a bunch of other morons that would kick the woman in the face with you. Okay? You're just such cowards. You're fighting with no good evidence, and you're just doing it because you have a mob. You have the jury on your side, so you can say anything you want because they're morons. You selected a jury of complete morons. You can lie and say any kind of shit, and they'll go for it as long as you say how cute they are. I mean, you're pathetic people. You have an obligation. You have 300 years of science that you're being the standard bearer for. That 300 years should have produced something of integrity. You should have something called fucking evidence. If you're going to claim it takes 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast, you really should show up with the fucking evidence. Alright, enough said. Fuck you, I could say that again. God, I hate you fucking people. I just really don't like you much. Anyway, till the next time and such.